8, 7, 6, go for main engine start, 2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery, returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond.
Welcome to the Orbital Perspective Podcast, where we dolly zoom out to a perspective where upcoming megatrends become visible. Every day, it is more and more apparent that we are in the midst of the great transition. Everything is changing rapidly. The fundamentals of business, government, and society are being rewritten almost on a daily basis. We are truly living during a time where the riskiest course of action is to stay the course. The most hazardous path is to take the tried and true. We are also living during a time where it is becoming more and more apparent that the status quo is not working. At least it's not working for everyone. And until the status quo is working for everyone, we will do nothing more than slap temporary band-aids on our problems and our challenges. We are presently dealing with crisis after crisis. But these crises can serve as a wake-up call. They can be our call to action to incorporate the changes necessary to make us all more resilient and better equipped to deal with the future crises that will undoubtedly come our way. The Orbital Perspective is all about transcending the divisive walls that separate us and embracing the awe and wonder of our shared humanity. What all the guests on the Orbital Perspective podcast have in common is they are all able to see things from a slightly different perspective. And when we look at issues from different perspectives, we see things in stereoscopic vision. Multiple perspectives allow us to see the depth of a situation below the two-dimensional us versus them surface. The other thing all our guests have in common is they are all proof that you don't have to be in orbit to have the orbital perspective. Now, this is not an interview, and it's also not just a conversation between two friends. It's a conversation amongst all of us. If you're listening live, please post your questions and your comments so that we can bring you into the conversation. And if you're listening to the recorded conversation, still please join in with your comments and questions and be a part of this evolving community. Thank you for being here and being a part of this conversation from the orbital perspective. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Orbital Perspective Podcast. I hope this episode finds everybody healthy and safe and dealing with and adjusting to this new world that we find ourselves in 2020. And as you heard in the introductory video, this is all about looking at things from different perspectives. And I'm really excited about my guest today. She certainly sees things from different perspectives and causes us, I think, to look at things from different angles and to see how things fit together and to look at things over, a long time frame, which is another part of this. And so we're in the midst of a great transition. We're in the midst of a lot of crises, and the only way that we're going to get through all these crises is together, is by unifying, is through the shared strength that comes from setting aside our differences and working together towards common goals. And that's what our guest, Dr. Leyla Acaroglu, is going to talk about today. And so with that, I'd like to introduce everybody to Leyla. Design disruptor, creative boundary pusher, and cultural provocateur, Dr. Leyla Acaroglu embodies the innovation that instigates positive environmental and social change. A designer, social scientist, and sustainability expert, she is internationally recognized as a leader in tools for the circular economy and the use of disruptive design across sustainability and educational initiatives. Leyla was awarded the 2016 Champion of the Earth by the United Nations Environment Program, and her 2013 mainstage TED Talk that has collected over 1 million views is one of the most watched TED Talks on sustainability. Leyla is founder of two design agencies, Disruptive Design in New York and Melbourne-based Echo Innovators, as well as the UnSchool, her uniquely rebellious experimental knowledge lab that is all about disrupting the mainstream way that knowledge is gained and shared. It runs innovative pop-up programs around the world, and recently she took an abandoned farm in Portugal and repurposed it as a living learning laboratory for UnSchool programs. The CO Project Farm is a bold example of sustainable design and social entrepreneurship. As a designer, her work is at the forefront of activated experience design. She continuously looks for new ways to solve complex social problems through beautifully designed interventions. Leyla's creative work is highly acclaimed, having been featured in a permanent exhibition in the Leonardo da Vinci Museum in Milan and earning commissions from the National Gallery of Victoria. Leyla is regularly invited to provide her professional opinions on radio and TV, having been a regular judge on the ABC TV show The New Inventors, along with a host of international programs. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. Leyla Acaroglu. Hey, Leyla. How you doing?
So great to see you.
Good to see you. And you're coming live from London, right?
That's right. Leyla is live from London. Say that 6 times.
Ron is live from Roswell.
Everybody should be in a place where their name rhymes with it.
Yeah. Normally I'm in my basement in Boulder, Colorado. Today I'm on the road and I'm in a hotel in Roswell, New Mexico. So.
Well, it is so great to connect with you again. I always love chatting with you, Ron. So looking forward to it.
And vice versa. And this is not just a chat between you and I. I want to remind everybody, please send in your comments, your questions, be a part of this conversation. Leyla is a wealth of insight and wisdom and knowledge. And I'm sure she could answer any question that you pose to her.
Maybe not any medical questions. I'm not a medical expert. I have a DR, but not a medical expertise.
So I'm thinking back to the time we met, and maybe not the day we met, but maybe the next day, So we met at the University of Arizona in Tucson, but the next day we were at an event in the Biosphere, Biosphere 2, just outside of Tucson. And I think that it is a pretty fitting place to meet someone of your background and your life's mission and everything else, basically to help protect Biosphere 1, which is the biosphere of Earth, and to bring to people's awareness that we really do live on a spaceship Earth, and that we need to watch out for the life support systems. But I think back on that day, and that was a wonderful day, and I remember we had some really wonderful conversations.
Well, Ron, do you remember though when I first met you? Like, I think it was back at the university. Yeah. Do you remember what I did when you told me you were an astronaut?
I don't remember.
Okay, so you said to me, "I'm Ron, I'm an astronaut," and I started petting your shoulder.
I would never say that.
I just started stroking your shoulder, and I was like, "A real astronaut," because I'm Australian, and I haven't actually ever encountered in my life an astronaut in the real flesh and blood. And what surprised me is since then I've learned that only under 600 people in the entire world have ever left Earth's orbit or Earth's atmosphere. So the chances of one meeting an astronaut is still quite rare. So, yeah. And then the next thing I asked you is, what does it look like from up there?
It looks just like this.
Well, I think you actually were a little bit more descriptive that it looks like this. But and then you showed me artwork that you made of what Earth looks like from space. And I was like, can I be your best friend? But I do recall as well being at Biosphere 2 the next day. And I was so overjoyed to be there because I had learned about Biosphere 2 in my sustainability program back at university. And I was absolutely completely mesmerized by this idea that, in the 90s, someone would invest $200 million to try and replicate Earth's atmosphere and then lock 8 people inside a giant dome to see if humans could indeed replicate Earth so that we could live in space or we could live on Mars or wherever else. And so it was really surprising to me to learn not only about how not so successful, to say in a nice way, it was, but also to walk around the biosphere and to see how much machinery was required to actually make this natural world work. And I don't know, did you go underneath? Did you go into the belly of the beast?
And the lungs.
So you said Spaceship Earth, and I'm a big fan of Buckminster Fuller as well, but who called Earth Spaceship Earth. But when I went underneath the biosphere, so at the top you have like the rainforest and the little ocean, and you have a little fog desert, and you kind of wander around, and there's beautiful trees and everything, and then you go down literally down into the earth under the biosphere, and it's all machinery, and it's all steel, and it's making all these noises, and it's like completely alien to how we associate our lives and nature and stuff. So I found that to be so evocative of the idea that we humans, we only have a kind of mechanical way of replicating nature. And that's one fascinating thing about the shift in perspective, is not only learning to respect and appreciate the natural systems that sustain our lives every second of every day, but that nature is not a machine. There is nothing machine-like in the world. We are not machines. We are complex, interconnected systems where if I took one part of my body out, the rest wouldn't work, except for my digestive system. That would successfully manage to exist without me because it's more other organisms than me. But the thing is that, that really struck me, that the mechanical, hard-edged side of things. So, I find, what did you think about going down underneath the belly of the beast and seeing the mechanical side of Biosphere 2?
Yeah, it's incredible. And I don't think it was a failure. I mean, I don't think that they met all their objectives, but the purpose of it was to learn. And I think they learned a lot. I mean, one of the things that is touted as a failure is the fact that they couldn't control the CO2, right? And the CO2 started to get high levels. And we learned a lot about how the CO2 cycle on our planet works because of that. So because of that failure. And so there's
I have a thing about failure, just to sorry, 1 second. I don't see failure as a bad thing. Failure is an opportunity to learn something new.
Exactly.
But I do find it like hilarious though that humans go and use all of their technical brain power, and we make this machine of nature that did, in a sense, fail the occupants. We learned a lot, you're right, but they got sleep apnea because of the CO2. They were starved basically, and the ability for them to live harmoniously as well was greatly jeopardized by the system, because that's the thing about nature, is it's not just 8 systems that you can squish together inside a dome. It's like millions of complex systems that are all interacting and working to harmonize each other so that we can actually get to the state that the earth and our bodies and every other system that's living wants, which is homeostasis, which is a sense of equilibrium. And I think that that's the thing that we really learned from Biosphere 2, is that nature is smarter than us, which is a very hard thing to realize, but a beautiful thing when you do.
Right. So homeostasis, right? So that's not just within our bodies, it's within our entire planet, right? And so we are not at an equilibrium point right now. As a matter of fact, we are, have all these crises that are swirling around us right now, many of which have been decades in the making, right? They're just coming to a head now in 2020. And you talk about design-led system change, right? So you also talk about how, and I really share this view with you, how everything is not only deeply interconnected, it's deeply interdependent, right? And so, and just like the biosphere showed us, and down in the basement with all those machines, none of them were working in isolation. They were all working in conjunction with each other. And we have living systems on our planet that all work in conjunction with each other. And so what can you speak about design-led system change that can help us with our overarching systemic changes that we need to make on this planet to help us navigate through and get through these crises that we're dealing with?
Okay, so I'll start with the design piece, because this is often where people get a bit stuck. So the entire world is designed by us to meet our needs. Of course, nature is designed in its own way, but as far as every single thing around us, every single minute of our lives, we are interacting with a conformed material world. So the products, the services, the systems such as government or, the hospital you were born in, the culture that you were raised in, these are all a product of human design, industrial design, like culture and society. They're all coming together to create the world that we know that we live in today. And that is some by kind of default, like evolution, you know, in a sense, culture and society kind of evolve over time. But the majority of the material world is completely constructed and designed by individuals or groups of humans to meet really specific needs, like telecommunication or something to sit on, some clothes to wear to keep warm, buildings to live in. So the design world is extremely influential because not only do we have to go to nature to take all of those resources out to make those goods and services, but we also then put things back into the natural world, be it pollution, waste, CO2, you know, flushing sewage from our toilets, you know, it all has to go back to nature, right? I always say the only thing that doesn't end up staying on this planet is space junk, which you would be able to talk about actually, which is the millions of bits of debris from all the space explorations. I bet did you litter in space, Ron?
Well, no, I don't think I did. I almost got hit by a piece of
question about space. Do you how, I know this is so crass, but truly, like, you know, I heard that aeroplanes, they just drop the human waste out of it. What do spaceships do when you have to poop?
Oh, that's a good question. So we basically do the same thing. And so all the waste of the space station all gets packed into a cargo spacecraft, and it comes back to Earth, but it doesn't have a heat shield on it. So it burns up in the atmosphere. Oh. And so it gets vaporized in the atmosphere.
Vaporized. Sorry, I should have said poop, but that's hilarious. So basically, so basically there's little bits of your being roaming around vaporized space. I don't know if that's correct.
My being and the being of the meals that I ate.
Yes.
Things are getting a little graphic. I think let's get back.
I'll pull it back to the design systems change now. So basically, so we design the world and the world designs us. That's one of the key things. So for every product or service or system that's around us, it's influencing us either in obvious or more subtle ways. So I say, you know, design is the silent social scripter that kind of helps us create the world that we understand and that we live in. And so there's all these classic cases of really bad design and how
products of our own design is what you're saying. Right? I mean,
we are products of our own design. Yes, we are. Yeah. Very, very good synthesis, Ron. So, but I just want to get people to think differently about design because, of course, it's very, sorry, my dog has just come over for a pet. It's a very important part of our entire experience of the world as a human and will continue to be into the future. And it's really the intersection that we have with the natural environment. A lot of the resources that we need to make good, like our iPhones or whatnot, have to come from far-fetched places, minerals mined, you know, all of these different processes. So that's the design piece. We are products of the world that we design, and in turn it designs us. But then we are also a living system, and we're part of a very, very complicated, beautiful, chaotic, mysterious set of systems that nature has evolved over millions and millions of years to sustain life, the only known life in the entire universe, which is pretty magical if you ask me. I'm sure you agree. And so there's this other elements. You have this man-made world of industrial machinery and products and processes, and then you have the naturally evolved systems, and they are kind of not like this. You have, like biosphere, a lot of disconnects between them. So again, that's where we have a lot of our problems. Someone wasn't happy about my space waste question. Well, look, I am very intrigued, but don't get all taboo on poop. It's very
Stay on track.
Okay, so yeah, basically the systems change component is that we need to figure out how to design products and services that meet our needs. So, you know, I'm going to say it, but toilets and sewage systems are very important for health and safety. It's an important element of my argument. And so essentially we've designed all those systems, but there are actually huge environmental and social implications around any of these systems. But that's really the big design challenge of our day, is how do we meet our needs in beautiful and elegant ways so that we can live healthy and happy lives in ways that do not negatively affect the ability for future systems to meet to be able to be regenerative and create positive change. Sorry. So basically that's the whole design systems change concept. And there are many ways in which we can go about doing that. Of course, there's this huge movement towards the circular economy, which is about understanding how we can design waste out of our systems. And of course, that requires us to design our production processes to be more regenerative and more understanding of the natural systems and the world around us. So that's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take it one step deeper. So here's a note from Monica talking about do we understand the concept that we are nature, meaning our environment is an extension of our existence, an extension of our being. And I profoundly experienced that in space, the interconnectedness, the interdependencies of everything. That looking down at the indescribably beautiful planet below me made me feel as if I was looking at a living, breathing organism that we were all part of, and that, Earth is a superorganism, whether we realize it or not. And the brain of this superorganism is an embedded superorganism known as humanity. The problem is that the superorganism is unconscious, right? We don't act as a unified body with the best needs of the overarching body in mind. We react to our loudest parts, and that's part of the reason, if not the main reason, why we face so many challenges and problems, is that we're not operating as a planetary community. We're operating as little stovepipes in our own little tribes. So I know from a systems design point of view, there's a lot to be said about that.
When you were in space and you were looking back at Earth, did you get a sense of disconnection from that system? Like, because you are part of that system, you as a human, and you are now in this, like, literally physically disconnected from the system that sustains you. How did that affect you?
Yeah, I think that's literally why I had that experience, is because I was physically disconnected from the only world I had ever known. Unplugged from the matrix, or whatever analogy you want to use. One of the analogies is meditation, where in meditation you become the silent, detached watcher of your own thoughts, right? And so I was a detached observer of the splendor and the miracle that is Earth and life on Earth. And from that detached point of view, physically detached point of view, I was able to experience that. And another analogy is, imagine you're at the rim of the Grand Canyon and you're looking at this beautiful scene in front of you and you're moved by that scene. But part of gravity is pushing you into the scene. You're inside the frame of the masterpiece, right? You're part of that masterpiece. You're part of that art, that beauty. But I was able to be outside of it and to see it from the outside. But what's really important to understand is that you don't need to be physically detached from the Earth to realize the interconnected, interdependent splendor of this miracle that we call Earth, that is our world, and how we can't treat things in isolation, that everything is connected and everything is interdependent.
So that's an interesting thing. Just to kind of sidestep here to talk about the COVID crisis and what we're in, a lot of research has been done prior to this crisis, but also as a result of it, around the ecosystem loss and the connection between ecosystem loss and zootropic diseases jumping to humans. So Harvard has a study around it, and many other leading research institutes have basically argued that, like, the destruction of ecosystems is directly correlated with the rise of dangerous diseases and viruses jumping over to humans and affecting us. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that, and how we can help elevate people's perspective of not only like the bigger picture of being interconnected, but the reality is that if we destroy the systems that sustain us, like a natural habitat, then we are exposing ourselves to more risk.
Well, there's the obvious, first order effects, right? If you live on a planet of finite resources, you can't have infinite growth, right? You can't have infinite consumption. There has to be the circular economy, right? We have to be able to reduce our waste and take care of our life support systems and all that. But what you're speaking about is the second order, third order, fourth order effects, and they ripple out. COVID is affected by global warming. I mean, it's also affected by deforestation and ocean acidification. Everything affects everything else, and everything especially affects everything else over the long term. And so we're right now paying the price for decisions that were made 30, 40, 50 years ago. And our great grandkids are going to pay the price for the decisions that we're making right now. And so what's really important is to think multi-generational, not only think interdisciplinary and to look at third, fourth, fifth order effects, but to look at those effects over a multi-generational time frame, I think, because when you do that, things become clear. It becomes more complicated and more complex, and we tend to oversimplify things. We want really simple answers, easy answers that work right now, that work today or tomorrow. But the world is not that simple, and the real problems that we face and the real challenges that we face have to be answered in the context of the real multi-dimensional world that we live in. We don't live in a two-dimensional world.
Yeah, I have a theory about that. I'll run it by you. Not all my theories land well. But so as humans, as we grow, we go from being quite close to the ground to getting higher and higher, and our eyes are on a horizontal plane for most of our lives. Okay, of course we lie down and whatnot, but we just spend a lot of our time looking at a one-dimensional plane in front of us, right? That's how our perspective. But we do live in a three-dimensional world, and we live in a very complex three-dimensional world where you can look up to the night sky and see the infinite possibility of the universe. And you can look down to a centimeter or a tiny patch of grass and see the infinite possibility of a bajillion microbes all doing their job, right? It's a mirror image, but we don't spend our time. In the past, stargazing and wondering about the universe was a kind of philosophical, conundrum. And the more information we've gotten, which is kind of ironic, the more myopic our view has gotten. So the more we know about the universe and the more we know about nature, the more our species has become fixated on the horizon versus on being able to shift our perspective and look in this more three-dimensional way. So maybe we should also, I don't know, go upside down or something. I don't know.
So do you think that's because of the more we understand, the more we understand the awe that the universe contains? And I mean, I know that I've heard people say when they understand that the grandeur and the enormity of the universe, it makes them feel really small. And I mean, do you think that's part of the issue of why?
I feel like the more you understand the magic of how the world works and how incredibly abnormal it is in the whole grand scheme of the universe, that there is life and that we're part of it and that we get to live it, the more exciting it is to be alive, and the less significant problems of kind of daily insignificance become, right? So I think it depends on how you view things and where your value is on like what's important. For me, I've learned over the years that I think many people, battle the concept of existentialism. Like, what is the point? Why are we here? I'm pretty sure that's this year has been the year of existential crises. So, and one of the things that I find very humbling is that for whatever reason one is here in this moment in time, the very fact that we are is like magic. Like,
it's a miracle.
I don't say that in a hocus pocus woo woo kind of way. I mean, literally the infinite possibilities of something happening to create life in the way that it's been created, and that we are who we are, and that we have created this world that we live in with all of its problems and all of its chaos. And for me personally, realizing owning that understanding of the world has given me a lot of agency as just one human with very not specific skills or talents other than being extremely passionate about the planet, to kind of take on a lot more space to have this conversation and to kind of poke and prod and push in the buttons, and because it's just magic. Like, it's a complete and utter miracle that any of us are alive, and that we get to watch butterflies and eat cheese. So
I think you're bringing up a really good point, because I think the only way that we're going to solve the problems that we face is to start with the awareness and the realization that every single person and every life form on this planet is a statistical and mathematical miracle. So the person who flips you off in traffic, the troll on the internet, everybody is a statistical and mathematical miracle. And if that is the foundation for problem solving, for interacting in society, that the people that you come in contact with, every single person and your little puppy, are all absolute miracles. The chance of any of us being here are just beyond comprehension.
Yeah, I think that also then strikes this challenge around the problems, like you just mentioned, because there are a lot of kind of interconnected problems that are at play at the moment, and there have been throughout all of human history, right? Like, one of the reasons we have been so successful as a species is because we figured out how to control land to grow crops for ourselves, which was a huge challenge. Getting enough sustenance and food to not pass out from a lack of energy has been a huge issue for humans for a long time. I mean, partly one of the reasons we were able to create agricultural systems was because of a stabilizing climate, because of the Holocene, right? Like 10,000 years ago, the climate just started. Did you know there used to not be water in the Mediterranean?
I did not know that.
No, like there were during the Ice Age, all the oceans froze, so the water receded up, and then once it started to melt, then it kind of refilled again.
What did they call it back then?
I don't know. I don't know. There wasn't any writing. It was like there wasn't any text messaging back then. Maybe there was some hieroglyphs. I don't know what they called it. But anyway, the point that I'm getting at is that, we've been able to succeed and overcome challenges in the past as a species. And I feel that we will definitely be able to overcome these pressing challenges that are in front of us now, be it climate change, waste crisis and COVID. But the thing that I wanted to raise is this idea of the point that we're in, right? So, 10,000 years Holocene. I'm not a geologist, but I got really into this when I heard about this concept, the Anthropocene, right? Like anthro meaning humans. And the reason this came about, Paul Crutzen, I think his name is, kind of stood up in a conference and said it because these Earth system scientists spent years documenting changes to the natural environment and changes to the human population. And they came up with all these graphs that demonstrate what they now call the Great Acceleration, which literally a hockey stick graph. So they're like, everything's fine, whoop, across all indicators, right, on natural systems and how they are. It's like driving a car. Oh, it's like being on a spaceship, and all of a sudden all of the doobie whackers go like this, and you're like, quick, there's an emergency. And so this kind of created this stark realization within the science community that there was a point very recently in these graphs where everything changed. And the Great Acceleration is the set of graphs that they're called, if you want to look them up. But the point is actually the 1950s. And geologists since then have spent a lot of time exploring what it is that caused that. What do you think happened in 1950 that shifted all of these graphs about like the Earth systems and how they operate, ocean acidification and stuff? What do you think happened then?
Sputnik.
It's close. It's very close. Yes, I mean, there was several things that happened, obviously, the baby boom post-Second World War, but it was actually the nuclear testing that started then. And so for over 2,500 nuclear warheads were let off around the world. And that's the point that they've started to state, where humans actually have had such an impact on the Earth that every single part of the planet has been affected by nuclear isotopes. And, they've done sediment samples back hundreds of thousands of years, and they've got a tree off an island in New Zealand that no one's ever interacted with because it's like one random spruce tree living on a deserted island, and its core has nuclear isotopes in it. So wow. This marker of this, I think, this kind of like great shift away from being in a more homeostasis environment. Oh, that's really funny. Sorry, I just thought of something in my head. Anyway, so we'll just keep on track though. So this kind of transition away from being, things were pretty messy in the beginning of century anyway. So, from a social standpoint. But anyway, from a kind of understanding where we've come from and where we're going, a mindset, which is why I'm telling this story, is that we live in this time now called the Anthropocene that has been documented as a time where humans, the anthros, have had such a huge impact on the planet that we're the dominant force influencing it. It's no longer ice ages or whatever. And I think, to me, when I went and researched all of this and learned about it, I felt overwhelmed, and then I felt really empowered. Because I thought, well, crap, if we manage to create the mess, then surely we have the capacity to clean it up. And that's something for me that I think has been really inspiring, because if we are the dominant force on the planet, well, then we can figure this out, right?
Right. You know what's interesting is the very day that I was born, the Soviet Union exploded what was called the Tsar Bomb, which to this day is the largest human-made explosion in history. It was a 50 megaton bomb that was exploded near the Arctic island of Novaya Zemlya, which means New Earth in Russian. And not to plug my new book, but I have a new book coming out where that's kind of the theme is the evolution of society, and mirroring it with our own individual evolutions as people. And so, I want to pop up a question or a comment here from John. You're a UN champion of the Earth. Can the UN serve as a global platform, getting the message out of elevating public awareness and adoption? There needs to be a global platform, or the message is diluted. So you talked a lot about how we got to be the rulers of the world, right? Because of our ability to cooperate on large scales, right? But lots of species can cooperate on massive scales: ants, bees, fish. But all those species, including us, tend to limit their cooperation to their community, however that's defined: the anthill, the beehive, the school. I believe, this year, 2020, everything's coming to a head. And I think we're at a fork in the road. And in order for life to survive and thrive on this planet, one species on planet Earth, known as humanity, needs to become the first species in the history of life on our planet to be able to figure out how to cooperate on a planetary scale. And basically to expand our definition of community to encompass the entire Earth and every living system on it. And so that's what we haven't done yet. Our cooperation and our collaboration has not been on the scale that's going to be required to undo the damage that we've done. You said we've made the problem. That means that we can fix it. We can only fix it if we learn how to work together as a planetary society. I don't know if the UN is the answer. I mean, I know that was the thought behind the UN, but I don't think bureaucracy is necessarily the answer. Yeah. Well, I immediately put my systems mindset in, and you make me think of this kind of tragedy of the commons, which is when you can't collaborate, a common resource becomes exploited because different agents will basically take all the value out to keep it for themselves. So the oceans are a classic case of tragedy of the commons, in the sense that people just keep exploiting them and to kind of get that value for themselves. And I think that, without going into too much of a kind of dissection of the species of human that we are, but we are a social pack animal. We do require kinship and a sense of relationship, right? There are so many factors that influence our willingness to engage with others, or to the desire to oppose others, right? And some of those factors are kind of social. I mean, they've just been evolved over time, like our culture that we've been growing up in and whatnot, and the media and all these external factors. And some of them are internal as well. Like some of them are our own value sets of what we see to be important for ourselves and how we see ourselves in relation to others. So I feel like I don't have an answer to this, okay, because it is a very complicated question. And I think that the UN and many other international organizations were set up with the best intentions and do the best they can under pretty complex conditions. And when I say that, I mean that, I don't know, I think everybody listening to this would have be able to think of a moment where consensus decision making, meaning you tried to get everybody in the room to agree to something, did not go very well. Because of those internal
opinions and the external pressures, we often have conflict over who's right and who's wrong. And so coming to a consensus, coming to an alignment, especially when it comes to really complicated things, such as the use of resources or who gets to pollute and who doesn't get to pollute. Or the fact, like we've had the whole discussion over climate change at the UN level, is, well, the Western countries made all the pollution and got all the wealth. They extracted all that value out of nature and put carbon emissions back into the atmosphere in that process. And now we expect all the emerging economies to not also go through their own development stage and get the benefit of that extracted wealth. And that's basically been one of the main blockages of collaboration around action for climate change. Whereas the Montreal Protocol, which was the successful UN agreement around the hole in the ozone layer, for those of you who are old enough to remember what that is, Ron, you probably remember what the hole in the ozone layer is, don't you?
Yes.
But I think if you ask kids these days, they're like, no, I've got no idea. But, you know, basically there was an international agreement to phase out CFCs from refrigerators and hairsprays, and it worked, and they were able, now the hole in the ozone layer is repairing. So, yeah, I think that there is so much other opportunities that we haven't explored yet. That's the thing, you know, and that's again where the design comes into it, because we design a lot of these systems, like big orchestrating systems like the UN is a product of design, and we have the capacity to kind of conceptualize those ideas, and hopefully through good procedures we can put them in place. You know, I mean, what are your thoughts on the kinds of collaboration opportunities that we have in front of us?
Well, I mean, I like where you're going with design-led systems, because just out of curiosity, what's your opinion of CRISPR drawers?
Of what?
CRISPR drawers in refrigerators.
I thought you meant CRISPR, the medical, like the gene editing.
No. You know, where you put your lights.
My opinion, this is a big sideline. Well, I have a very strong public opinion on refrigerators and their design, and I think they're appalling.
But I mean, I didn't mean to derail us to go down that path, which is a really good path, and we can go down it. But what I meant by that awkward segue is that we are a product of our designs, right? And we have all of these human-made systems, whether it's our political systems or our financial systems, our computer systems that are molding us. We don't mold those systems to meet our needs as an overarching, you know, superorganism. We mold them to meet the needs of our you know, commercial activities, and in a lot of cases that's very harmful to us. And so, you know, to answer your question, I think if we can get smart about how we design our systems and our subsystems and our you know, whether that's cultural systems, business systems, political systems, to not be the product of our not mold us into the likeness of our systems, but to mold our systems into what we want our visionary restorative future to look like. I think that would be a good step in the right direction.
And I think you speak to this idea of, like, you know, you get what you create. Like there's all these sayings, you know, you get what you measure and whatnot. But I also think that we have this, oh, Keith, the CRISPR drawer is what keeps your lettuce and other vegetables fresh in your refrigerator. You know those drawers at the bottom that are supposed to keep things crisp, but they actually don't? I think they should be called the soggy vegetable drawer, because they're not designed effectively to create an atmosphere that oxygen doesn't slowly.
I just wanted to see how easy it would be to sidetrack you
from the vegetables. Yeah. But I think the thing is that I've completely been sidetracked. I'm now redesigning CRISPR drawers in my head. I can't even recall what you had said. I'm sorry. What were you talking about?
I got distracted with CRISPR drawers too. No, how we can, instead of having our systems mold us into their likeness, you know, figure out what the visionary restorative future is, and then design systems to lead us there.
Yeah. So this is actually, you know, why I kind of took on the challenge of learning how to farm and grow food and restore a system. I took on an abandoned farm, and I tried to figure out how nature worked in a kind of embedded way. So I got very, very good at farming quickly through lots of failure. But the thing that I learned through that of many things I learned. But one of the key things was that, there's nothing in nature that doesn't have a role, and that role is usually of greater value after it's gone through its cycle. So everything is just a building block for creating new life. Like life is optimized to create more life. So, a tree that looks like it's dying is actually sharing resources with the other trees around it as the microbes come and degrade it. Or the fact that a tree stump that looks like it's dead is being still sustained by the trees, its fellow friend trees that are near it, by mycelium, who's taking resources and sharing it, because mycelium is like basically the resource highway of the underground, and when you kind of spend a lot of time in natural systems and very closely observing them, you start to see these things, and it's like this magic curtain is kind of pulled from in front of your eyes, and you're like, oh my God, this shit is magic, right? Like, it's incredible. And we are part of that, and we are beneficiaries of that. And so if you use that as a model for designing systems, that is that every part has a role to play in its first life and then how it cycles through, then we can really truly design systems that are regenerative, right? So sustainability is a pathway to regeneration. It's about figuring out how to stabilize, to not continue to extract resources at a faster rate than the Earth can replenish, as we currently are. Although this year, because of COVID, did you know that Earth Overshoot Day came back a month?
No.
Yeah. So this, every year there's a measurement of when we run out of the Earth's resources for that year, what like allocated resources if we were to be sustainable. And every year it's kind of come back since the 1970s. And last year it was in July. So basically it was like the middle of the year we used up all of the natural resources that we should have used. But because of COVID and the slowing down of the economy and, extractionary practices and pollution, it went forward a month, sorry. And so it ended up being in August this year.
We all die in August instead of July now.
Yeah, but I don't think as well, just for those people who are listening who might be like, well, we need the economy is really important. I completely agree. And I think that there are so many ways of creating economic opportunities that don't destroy the systems around us. And that the reason we have so many polluting and wasteful and extractionary systems, other than GDP is the motivator, but is that we just haven't designed better options. It's like
because we don't see a commercial
challenge.
There's not a commercial. There's a commercial incentive to put planned obsolescence into things, right? I mean, there is no commercial driver for companies yet. I think where that comes from is from consumers demanding it.
I have so many things to say about planned obsolescence, Ron. It's like a trigger word for me. But that planned obsolescence was intentionally part of an economic rebuilding post-Second World War, because all the factories had been in the war effort, and the industrial designers and other entrepreneurs of the day basically publicly were saying, we need to design things to break so that we can continue the wheels of the economy, so that we can rebuild. So, that worked then, but it doesn't work now. Yeah. And it worked when you had several billion less people to start with, which is the case. And it also worked when you had more ignorance around the inability for certain systems to replenish themselves. There's a point where you've destroyed the system so much it can no longer replenish itself, right? And that's really one of the key factors now, is we have a lot of that knowledge, and we're very aware from a scientific standpoint, and also from a living in the world standpoint, that if you pump a lot of pollution out into the atmosphere, then those people who are breathing in that pollution will die. Air pollution kills like 9 million people every year. It's a huge health crisis that nobody talks about. So I think that the key thing here is changing the way we see what is valuable and what is not. Like, we don't value nature in any way, shape, or form in our current economic model. But I think personally, especially COVID, has made people really reassess their values and consider that essentially one of the key things that is of value to us is the natural world, and is the people and the things that come from that. And that is something I think that we are really starting to have built into our modern psyches, is that without nature, we are at a loss, literally, because we need food, air, and water, but also culturally and socially, and for some spiritually as well. Like, without the natural world living in its entirety and its beauty, we are at a collective loss. So, I think that's one of the key things that we can all start to think about, how we can contribute to regenerating some of the systems that are around us, even in small ways. I have a worm farm on my balcony. I make soil because soil is the best thing. We need it. It's very important. It sequesters carbon, and it also gives back the building blocks to life for more food to be produced. So, we all have the opportunity to make change, Ron. And so I think we can
That's right.
do it.
And Leyla, I really, really applaud what you're doing, because I think when it comes down to it, a lot of the problems that we face are a matter of ignorance. And I don't mean that in any derogatory way. It's a matter of lack of knowledge, right? And I genuinely believe that the vast majority of the people in the world want to do the right thing. They want a positive future. They're willing to take the steps now to ensure that our great grandchildren have a world to inherit. But the problem is that they don't always know what to do. And you have a really good example, I guess, of paper versus plastic, right? In bags, where people might be getting a paper bag because they think it's the right thing to do, when in reality it might not be the right thing, because they're not taking the whole big picture. They're not zooming out to the big picture. And I talk about zooming out as a dolly zoom, and a dolly zoom is a cinematic term that I borrowed. That basically means you dolly the camera back as you zoom the lens in, or vice versa. And it's used in a lot of films like Jaws and Psycho. But anyway, it basically means in this context that we zoom out to the biggest picture possible, but without losing the worm's eye details on the ground. And we keep in focus the short-term effects of what we're doing while we zoom out to the long-term effects and the multi-generational effects. And I think a lot of what you're doing in your educational projects and your TED Talk that got over 1 million views, that I highly recommend everybody watch, is to start to dispel some of those myths and to basically empower people with the knowledge to do the right thing. Because like I said, I think most people will do the right thing. And there's, I guess, a lot of, to use your words, a lot of environmental folklore that we need to overcome.
Can I add to the thing that I most recently learned? Actually, my sister made me aware of this. I have a TED Talk from like 7 years ago called Paper versus Plastic, and I go on about bags. And for many years, I was kind of known as the bag lady. Because the thing is that plastic bags, when you look at the full life cycle, they have a lower impact than paper, not because plastic's better than paper. It's that the amount of paper required to achieve the same functionality as carrying groceries home on a plastic bag is greater. And so you have just a kind of bigger impact per like functional unit, okay? And the paper has a big impact on the planet. Now, what I just learned is that the guy who created the plastic bag was actually trying to solve a problem. He was really passionate about solving the problem of the 1950s. Guess what it was? Deforestation from paper bags.
Wow.
So the plastic bag was designed to be lightweight, compact, and carryable and reusable, so that you could stop using paper bags, which in those days was a huge environmental problem.
And still is, right? They still are.
I mean, this is a classic case of using the same thinking to solve a problem that got you into the problem, right? So as Einstein said, that's not a good idea. And, Peter Senge, a systems thinker, has a great line, which is that we should be sure to solve not create tomorrow's problems with our solutions today, essentially. Right. Exactly. And, one other quote that I love is from another systems thinker, Russell Arkoff, who says, it's better to solve the right problem wrong than the wrong problem right. And I think that that's also part of the misconceptions, the myths and the things that we have, is that we go all gung-ho solving completely the wrong problem. And so you might make the most beautiful solution, but if the problem's wrong, what's the point? Because you haven't actually really kind of understood what's going on. And so, there's so much opportunity to kind of unveil, the world and see the hidden secrets of the things around us, and to have that curiosity mindset that we get kind of bashed out of us through education at school, and to find ways of being more present in the systems around us in all their chaos and glory and complexity, and the other really great thing I love in systems thinking is that there is no blame, because if everything's interconnected and everything's extremely complicated, that you actually truly can't blame any one part of the system. You can assign kind of a greater responsibility, but you can't say, well, that bit there is the main point of problem. So it's a really liberating mindset to have.
So I guess the big question is, in this era that we find ourselves in, which I've heard labeled the post-truth era, where it's so easy to send out disinformation, misinformation, false statistics and everything else. How can we, sort through all that noise and get to the real answers? So this is obviously something that's been frustrating a lot of people, myself included, in, how do we get the truth out amongst all the noise that's circling around?
Well, I think for every human, the truth is different. And that's the problem in that kind of quest. So perhaps maybe the quest isn't to get the truth, but perhaps change the vantage point or perspective, which is really what you're trying to help do. And in another way, I'm trying to help do, in the sense that we don't just have this one, it's just not our one idea. It's just not this one view. So that horizontal linear perspective of the world, no matter what your base values and truths are, because truth is different for many people based on their own ideology and experience and philosophy. I think that your goal of uniting people around the common value of the earth, and it being our entire shared home, a living ecosystem and organism that we're part of, helps to give everybody that bigger picture perspective. And I think that if on a very individual level, we accept that we are locked into our own view and perspective of the world. So you have seen Earth from space. I have seen video of Earth from space. I have seen Earthrise. I can vicariously live through the detailed explanation that you provide, but I will never, ever know, Ron, what it's like to truly, viscerally, personally experience that. And so that is what most of the world is like for people, like somebody who's had a traumatic an event or been abused, so we talk about the concept of empathy, but I think, it's more about this ability to have the ability to see the world from multiple vantage points and perspectives, not just our own viewpoint, but to see it from these other perspectives, to live vicariously through the language of others where we can, and to find ways of being our true self. Yes, what's true for me is different to what's true for you, but that we do have shared truths. So maybe then the outcome is like, how do we create the narrative of the shared truths or the shared values that are really important to us as a species? And I don't think there's one human alive today who would say that they don't want oxygen, because they'd be dead 60 seconds later. And I think that, the services that nature provides us for free are some of the universal truths that are of importance to us. So, that's kind of how I would think about that, because I think humans are complicated and you can't make them all see your perspective of the world. You cannot make everybody see the planet from space the way you've seen it, even if they think they have. You have had one unique experience that is so real to you, but all we can do is hope to experience what it's like. Do you see what I'm saying?
But I think there's a distinction here, though. I have a lot of opinions that were formed by my life experiences over, the decades that I've been on this planet, and the little bit of time that I've been off the planet. And so those have helped formed opinions that I have. But as a human species, the best we have right now is our rigorous, peer-reviewed scientific information, right? That is the best we have. Now, is science always right? No, it's not always right. But science is humble enough. There's enough humility in the scientific pursuit to recognize when a contradictory piece of evidence is presented. We abandon our old scientific theories and adopt the new scientific theories that have gone through the scientific process. And so I agree with everything you're saying, but I would also add to that we have to base those things and our own truths on the best data that we have available. And as a species, the best data that we have available at the moment is our scientific studies, our peer-reviewed, rigorous, interdisciplinary studies that cannot just be dismissed because of opinion. We have to bring those into the conversation.
There is a lot of difference between opinion and peer-reviewed science, and I think a lot of people have confounded. Is that the right word? Conflated or confounded? I always get confused. They've made their own opinions of opinions, and a lot of people can go online now since we've changed broadcasting processes and basically voice opinions. And maybe then the starting point is giving people the BS detector on the difference between opinions and peer-reviewed facts, because that is hard. Ron, I really love how you could just say, for the years I've spent on the earth and the time I've spent off the earth. No, truly, because I think about it and I'm like, it's like when I was a kid, I really wanted to know what it would be like to live inside someone else's head. That sounds creepy. But what I actually just thought about it was like, I remember seeing this guy walking down the street and I was just thinking, I wonder what his life's like. Like, I was just sitting there thinking, what he feels like. What does the sun feel like for him on his skin? I was a very inquisitive, 10-year-old. And ever since then, I've always been very perplexed by this idea that I will always be me, as far as I know, for as long as I live, with all of my inner brain, and you will always be you. And you've had this unique experience, which, is lucky you kind of thing. But at the same time, we all have our own unique experiences that we can perhaps even use as our kind of tools for helping to create change. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be that there is a universal truth in regards to the planet and the science of how it works and everything. But how do we, as a complex species with multiple opinions and perspectives and values and ideas and opinions, come to that collaborative outcome that you're talking about? How do we do that? And I think that maybe finding a way of sharing the perspective of others, even if we don't agree with them or something, I don't know.
So I think you bring up the main point of and the main requirement for us to be able to solve the problems that we face. And we talked about that we're at this fork in the road. We're at this really critical juncture of human history and a juncture of in the history of all life on our planet right now. And I think what is going to be required for us to go down the right path and to come out of this thing and to be able to thrive and reach equilibrium and everything else is an evolutionary leap. And I think the first big evolutionary leap, the leap that made us human in the first place, was when we evolved to the point where we had the ability to self-reflect, when we had the ability to project our conscious thought outwards, billions of years, or backwards billions of years, to think of something other than the present moment, right? To think of a possible future that's not the present. So I think in order for us to get on the right path, we need to take the next giant leap in evolution, and that's to realize that the self that we're reflecting on is not just an individual, but it's part of a larger cosmic journey. That the self that we're reflecting on is, in a sense, the human organism. It's in a sense all life on the earth, and in a sense it's the entire universe. And I know that's a pretty deep path to go down, but I think the slightest recognition of that, of your sharing in humanity with another person, that we are not just a life, we're life itself. We're not just alive, we're life itself. We are the embodiment of life in individual nodes called persons, but we're together, a collective life that has to act collectively. I think that's the next giant leap of evolution.
Even if you don't like the other node.
Exactly. especially if you don't like the other node.
Yeah.
Especially. Because what that enables us to do is to have empathy, and that's what you were expressing is you were empathizing with a person walking down the street, wondering out of curiosity and empathy what that person's life is like. And I think if we don't have the capability to do that, we don't have the capability to solve any of our problems. And so I think that's probably a good place to end.
I agree.
I'll think about that. But Leyla, how can people find out more about you, about your work? You have so much stuff going on. You have so many great things that you're doing. Can you share your websites or anything else?
for the UnSchools, unschools.co, so SCHOOLS.co, unschools.co. We have lots of different resources and content. There's heaps of free stuff there. If you're interested in circular economy stuff, as well as we have programs and classes, and it's a school for adults, by the way. It's a school for humans who have usually woken up one day and gone, holy crap, this isn't how I wanted the world to be. I want to contribute to making it a better place. Right. So they come to the UnSchool, undo the damage of all of that mainstream education, and learn systems thinking and sustainability. And then I also have Disruptive Design, which is a design agency where we use design as a catalyst for change. And through that, we work with organizations, we collaborate, we design tools and resources to help, whether it be internal organizational change or larger scale impact. So we've done lots of different projects, education systems for Finland, for Thailand. And so, yeah, you can find all of those things online, and you can also just Google me. You can see my TED Talks. I've got lots of stuff online as well from all the talks and things I've done and books I've written and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, internet.
I encourage everybody to do just that.
You do and don't like.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to do just that because I've learned so much from you, and I really appreciate and admire everything that you're doing, and you are making a huge difference in the world.
Well, thank you, Rod. That touches me, actually. Thank you.
Thanks everybody who joined, and thanks for all your questions and comments. Keep them coming. Even if you're listening to this not live, put the comments in there. We'll do the very best we can to answer them. And next week, we've got a great guest. It's the former Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, and so that's going to be a great conversation. So we'll see you all next week. Take care. Thank you for joining us during this conversation from the Orbital perspective, and thank you for being a part of an emerging unity on our planet. We are strongest when we are aligned around the truth of our underlying unity. Together, we are unstoppable and can build a positive, restorative future, a future that we would all want to be a part of. Please subscribe to the Orbital Perspective podcast and follow us on social media. Thank you for all that you're doing and all that you will do to help make life on our planet as beautiful as it looks from space.